Hello and welcome to The Herd Has Spoken, a podcast brought to you by MuskOx Men's Apparel. Hello and welcome to The Herd Has Spoken, episode number 28 today with adventure seeker extraordinaire Corey Miller. When I think back to my first true backpacking experience, when I disappeared into the Rockies and the Cascade Range there, I remember just how awe-inspiring it was to truly see the Mountain Dew in the morning. We thought that was pretty funny, me and my friends, a true Mountain Dew as opposed to the terrible for you soda. It was such an awe-inspiring moment, and it really has changed my perspective of the world, and I don't think that's an overstatement. And it was just so much fun getting a chance to talk with Corey today and him sharing a bit about his adventures and how he takes adventures to the next level, where he basically looks around his amazing area in British Columbia, Canada, and looks at the satellite images from Google Earth and says, that's where I want to go. And then he finds a way to make it happen. So if you're interested in taking things to the next level, or just listening to someone who does when it comes to your adventures, you're going to really appreciate today's episode. One quick plug before we turn it over to my interview with Corey. If you haven't had a chance to do so yet, check out goMuskOx.com. We've got all the gear you could want in terms of helping you be ready for your next big adventure. I know there's lots of pictures we have from Corey using MuskOx gear in his adventures. And I hope you're able to find a way to get outside, and that MuskOx can help. Again, goMuskOx.com. With no further ado, my conversation with Corey Miller. Corey, welcome to The Herd Has Spoken.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, so you're someone who obviously loves to explore and pursue adventure, arguably more than anyone who we've ever had on the podcast, and that includes some pretty extreme skiers that have joined us. But I'm curious where that sense of adventure comes from. I mean, obviously, you grew up in British Columbia. You live in Kamloops, British Columbia now, which is a beautiful part of the Canadian Rockies for those that aren't familiar. But where is it that this passion to explore and go after new adventures really comes from?
Well, I guess it all started when I was young and in high school. Every weekend, a group of me and my friends, we would go up in the foothills there, and we would go hiking all day. And that's what we did all weekend. And of course, I kind of lost touch with that when I, graduated and got a job. I'd worked for the railway, and there was really no schedule with that. And I finally quit the railway after 12 years, found a job that gave me a lot of opportunity to do other things because I had a schedule and time off. And I started hiking, small hills. And then one day, my friend who lives in the Kootenays, in a town called Nelson, invited me out to come visit. And he said he wanted to go and hike in this peak called Gimli Peak, and it was in the Valhallas. And it was my first mountain hike. And once I got up there and I saw the views, and it just spiritually did something for me. It lifted me right up. And after that, I just wanted to keep challenging myself and hike, more mountains, more remote mountains, higher mountains, of course. And then, of course, looking on the apps, all trails and things like that, looking for, different adventures. And I guess that's how it all started.
Well, there's so many things here that I want to dig into here, but maybe just to paint the picture for folks that aren't as familiar with British Columbia or Gimli Peak, I wonder if you can maybe take a minute to just describe, British Columbia and the Canadian Rockies in your neck of the woods in terms of what the scene is like, just so people get a sense of how approachable or unapproachable it is to be able to get outside and get into the wilderness.
Okay, well, we have in BC many different mountainous regions. Starting right out from Vancouver. It's an easy 45-minute to an hour drive to get up into the Coast Mountains. And then, of course, like up in the interior, you have the Rockies and a bunch of other sub areas like the Bugaboos, the Valhallas. But either, it doesn't matter where you live in BC, you can drive, a couple hours or less and be up in mountainous territory.
And do most people take advantage of that?
Um, I'd say yes. A lot of people are willing to drive, 1 to 2 hours to go to these places. I know some people drive a lot further as well.
So one of the things that you mentioned in with respect to Gimli Peak, excuse me, a moment ago was how you just felt so much different. Like, so you'd gotten into the foothills a little bit as a high school student, kind of screwing around like most of us did,
Yeah, yeah.
and you kind of get this moment where now you're probably mostly an adult, and you return to the mountains and you go up to this peak and you kind of have this aha moment. What is that moment like, and how does that change your mental outlook after being able to look out at the vast landscape?
Oh, that's a tough one to describe, but it is just like, it's almost like when you're about to fall asleep. It just, the whole weight on your shoulders, the weight of everything is just taken right off, and you're just so relaxed and at peace in the moment, and just, the visuals, the scenery is just amazing beyond, beyond explanation. And you're just trying to take that all in. Sometimes, I get up there and I'm in relaxed mode, but then there's sometimes I get up there and I'm like a kid on Christmas, you know, waking up. I'm so excited. Sometimes the nights before I can't even sleep. I got maybe 1 or 2 hours of sleep, but when you get up there, it's just and the sense of accomplishment as well. It's really something.
And do you feel like you have a halo effect, right? So how is Corey for the day, the week after one of those hikes as compared to a couple weeks beforehand? Do you feel like it has staying power with you in terms of your mental outlook and disposition?
Oh, 100%. It's like it's like a happy drug, really. Like, it's a happy place, and it's a recharge of, you know, um, a mental being and everything. It just, there's something about it that just, you know, puts you right back up on the pedestal and recharges your soul.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling, and the first time you really get a chance to go up in the mountains and you're truly in wilderness is I feel like a first time that you'll never really forget, and it's
Yeah.
funny to hear you kind of reference that first time moment again as an adult. So as you've evolved and you go on just a ton of fantastic adventures now, and to track Corey, please check him out, mountain man underscore Miller at on Instagram. But as you've evolved, do you find that you want to go up and explore solo, or do you like to have a partner, or do you like to be in a group? Like what's sort of the ideal approach to getting away these days for you?
Well, most of the time I do hike solo. It's not by choice. It's just, it's difficult to get people's schedules lined up with work, family life, that kind of thing. But preferably, I would like to do, a small group, 3 to 4 people. That's usually, ideal, especially, there's hiking in grizzly territory, hiking numbers. But I would say, 3 to 4 is an ideal number to hike with.
What?
Um, when you get the bigger groups, of course, then you have issues with people's different levels of athleticism and abilities, you know. But when you're a smaller, tight group, you kind of know each other's abilities, and you know, everyone can agree a little bit better. You know, big groups, sometimes you have people not that agreeable and have, you know, other things that they want to do or other ideas, and they want to do it their way, you know.
Two's a company, three's a crowd. You know, that starts to be
Exactly,
injected in a lot of
exactly.
steroids. The bigger and bigger group you get.
Yeah.
And I would totally appreciate that. One of the things that I think is really interesting about, you know, just kind of following you, you know, as a great supporter of MuskOx, and following your Instagram feed, again, mountain man underscore Miller, but is the fact that you tend to do a lot of day hikes, and you do things really aggressively during those days, but it feels a little bit more approachable maybe to the average person. So I'm curious if I'm reading that correctly in terms of what you're doing, or if it's just sort of by definition you go on more day hikes because you can do 5 in 5 days versus you go on one big 5 day hike and it's only one hike. So for you, you know, what is it that you're looking for when you're going out on a hike? And do you like to pursue the longer trips, or do you really love to like see how far you can push yourself in one day?
I guess it's really, you know, well, the reason why I do mostly day hikes is because there's less planning. And of course, your backpack is a lot smaller and
Very
less
true.
gear. And like you said, you can, you know, you can travel a lot faster and hike a lot more peaks than you can if you're backpacking. You know, because sometimes it takes, you know, 3, 4 days to get to your objective and whatnot. But I would say that I don't really look at distance, although I do kind of have a threshold where I like to stay kind of below 30 kilometers for a day hike, and you know, and around 2,000 meter accumulative elevation gain. Although I have gone over that, but I can definitely feel it afterwards. But yeah, I would say, you know, my ideal hike is probably like 15 to 30K and, you know, roughly around 1,200 meter elevation gain. But I've definitely sometimes the smaller and shorter hikes are, you know, I'm pretty appreciative of those ones too.
Yeah, I love it. There's a lot of great variety here, but what I really love about your hikes, based on my understanding, is that you're not one of these people that says, "Hey, let's open up all trails and just go ahead and do what the most popular trail is in this area." You're one of these people that uniquely says, "Let's give me a topo map. Let me look at things first, and I'm going to figure out where I want to go." And yeah, I'm going to see if there's any resources out there. But if there's not, I'm not going to be deterred at all. In fact, I'm going to be encouraged. I'm going to find a new trail, and that might mean that I'm doing a whole bunch of bushwhacking, but I'm going to get up to the peak that I want to, and I'm going to chart my own course. How did you come to develop that mentality, and why do you think it is that so many people are I don't want to say intimidated, but they're just not quite ready to take that leap of faith where they would be creating their own trails to the peaks on a map?
Well, I guess it starts out, you know, people are used to the trails and not familiar with, you know, navigating them themselves, you know, or not having a report to go by. Um, and that can be a little intimidating, you know, being up there and getting lost. So there are a lot of people that just, you know, just stick to the trails and reports and stuff like that. But how that's how I started too. But then I, like you said, I wanted to start venturing further out where less people have traveled, and if not, maybe no one has traveled. And I would just sit on Google Earth and use the feature Google Earth 3D. And I would literally sit on my couch and look at Google Earth 3D for hours and just zoom in and see a mountain that's got some beautiful lakes around it. And look at it and be like, wow, you know what? I want to be there. So then I would look and see if there's, a logging road close by or something like that. And then check out the elevation using this other app. It's called View Ranger. It's got like contour lines and everything like that. That's what I use to plan my route, plot my waypoints and whatnot. So then
Sure.
I'll look at the elevation to see, okay, how high up does this logging road go? And then I kind of look for a ridge to see, and plot my route. And then I look at, and it can show like the elevation, the steepness, and the grade. And that's how it kind of started out. It kind of started just like playing around with smaller hikes like that. And then, of course, have gone through some, trial and error. There's sometimes I've, mapped a route and got up there and it was like, completely blocked off by another big, huge, massive canyon. And I've had that before, but you learn and learn to adapt and use the the contour lines, and even like the Google Earth 3D, you can kind of get it's not the greatest when you zoom in, but you can kind of have an idea. And once you've been using it for quite a while, you can look, and things that I look for too is like space and trees. If you see a lot of trees, before, like here's an example, see a lot of trees, oh, you know what, I can go through that. But then when I get up there, there's so much deadfall, it's like there's no way we're going to make it through this.
Right.
And also like another example is, I'm like, I look and see below this mountain, oh yeah, looks like there's a bunch of rocks there. But of course, you get there and they're huge car-sized boulders that you gotta hop for 4 kilometers. It's interesting, but I've definitely have gotten a lot better with it. And last year was one of my most memorable hikes. It was
Bridge River cones.
Yes, there. I don't think, like, I haven't seen any trips, reports, or anything of there. And I just went out there one day, and it's a small old, I guess, ghost town. It used to be actually one of the biggest towns in BC when back in the gold rush years.
Place called Goldbridge, correct? Am I tracking with you?
Goldbridge, and now it's a population, I think, of 46. But,
that's 46,000, right, Corey?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a small town now. And I drove out and did this one hike, and it's called Glacier View Peak. And there wasn't much on it, but I just managed to, pull out Google Earth 3D and my app that I use for plotting my routes, and found a ridge from the logging road. So I managed to get up there and was in the Alpine and made my way to the top of this peak. And way off in the distance, I could see just this giant ice field with just, this big moraine lake, and the ice fields just coming down. And it was huge. It was way up, as high as you could see, and it was quite something. And I said to myself, I got to be up there. I got to find a way to get up there. And from where I live, it's about a 6-hour drive. So of course, I drove out there again because there's so many canyons coming from these glaciers that, they're not just rivers that you can walk across. They're actually, straight drop off like a 90, 100 feet. So I tried looking for any logs or bridges or anything. I even brought my drone out there, flew my drone out there. I went up there, a couple times, couldn't find anything. And I figured, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it there because there's no way across. And I was sitting at home one day and I looked, and I saw a little line across the video that I'd taken with my drone that's going across the creek. So I said, what is that? That's not a log. There's something out there. So again, 6 hours to drive out there just to check and see if what this line was. And of course, I used my Google Earth and my map app to find out and pinpoint where it was. And I got there, and it was a old trolley car. And
Wow.
so I checked out the of course, the cable, and it looked like the cable was brand new, and all the bolts and stuff was brand new. But obviously, the cable car itself was fairly old. I was pretty excited about this. And I got home and I messaged one of my friends and I said, "Do you want to go on an amazing hike up to the Lillooet ice fields, to the Bridge Glacier?" And my friend said, "Yes, let's do it." So we made a big plan, and I mapped everything out, what we were going to do on day one, hiking in, setting up camp. And then, day two, going down to the foot of this glacier, which was just it's huge. It doesn't look that big far away, but when you actually get there and you're standing beside it, and it's like this, 10, 15 story massive glacier just coming into this big, huge, beautiful lake. It's really something. And of course, the third day, mapping out a peak where we are literally surrounded all around us by these big, massive glaciers. And it was just amazing. And I don't think anyone's ever been up there. There was no signed footprints, no fire pits, or anything like that. It's just a place where we set up camp just at the subalpine there, and there must have been 20 to 30 beautiful alpine lakes. And watching the sun come up and the sun go down, it was the most spiritual thing I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, we worked for it, hiking in there. It was a bushwhack. It was thick. And my friend's legs cramped right up, and he was like all upset because he hikes all the time too. But he's like, this never
This is a
happens.
different type of hike.
Exactly. And we ran out of water. And so, of course, I pull out my app and I looking for a water source. I'm like, okay, well, we just got a little bit longer to go, and we can, I've got a MSR water pump. We can use that, fill up your water. And so we found the lake there and filled up with water. But yeah, it's really something up there, and I would have never been able to do that if I didn't start pushing myself into mapping my own routes. And
So Corey, what would you recommend to someone that's super intrigued with your content online and maybe listening to this podcast, but at the same time they're a little bit intimidated because this is a lot that you just described. What would you be your advice to them in terms of how to get started and what next steps would be?
Well, just like I did, get a app where you can plot routes. Learn, maybe take a course in orienteering just to learn the basics. Learn what the contour lines are, learn how to look at contour lines and see what the difference is, what a ridge looks like and what a valley looks like, and just start plotting routes around somewhere close by, and getting used to the app and getting used to plotting routes, following the route, and just going through from there, and start and then start challenging yourself, going further out, plotting different routes, or even just start use an app and just plot a route that's already got a trail, but just use the route to follow, and get used to that, of course.
Yeah, I love that because, for someone who's new into this, right, it'd be really nice to have a trail map to sort of default to. So you can keep that in your pack if you absolutely need to. It's there, but you can do it without it, and you're going to start to gain a little bit more confidence every time you do it and you get out there. And I think one of the best things is that you're not limited to what other people have figured out before when you do this. And that's by no means to poo-poo getting out there on trails that exist, because I think in so many cases, like, hey, that's the right way to do it. And we don't want to walk over, too many things. We want to keep nature as it is. But for these sorts of, new adventures, it really does open up a whole lot of, new opportunities, which is super exciting. And this is a big but on the flip side, when you're out there, backpacking or hiking, there are some dangers and some risks associated with that. So what are the biggest risks for you as you're going out there and pursuing these new adventures that you're taking into account as you're exploring?
I would say there are quite a few risks. Depending where you are, a lot of places I hike, I'm in grizzly territory. And, there's the risk of coming face to face with the grizzly bear. Um, you know, I haven't come face to face with a grizzly bear yet, and I've been hiking for about 4 years. And, knock on wood, but you have to know what to do and you have to be prepared. Obviously, you're going to have bear spray, but you, of course, want to teach yourself or learn how to use the bear spray before you get out there, because a lot can happen in a split second when you're especially when you're in panic mode. And so that's one of the risks, but you just don't think too much of it, because people start thinking too much about bears, and they scare themselves, and then they don't want to go unless they're with someone else. you know
Yeah.
if you make noise and let them know that you're around, that's what I do. And I mean, I've been hiking for 4 years. Like I said, I haven't seen a grizzly bear yet, and I've hiked a lot of grizzly bear territory. I've seen lots of signs of them as well. I look for rocks that have been freshly flipped over, logs that have been freshly ripped, tracks, scat. You just look for those kind of things, make yourself aware that there is something around there, and then you just start making a little bit of noise, and you a little bit more intuitive and listening to your surroundings. Also, another risk is, of course, you're by yourself, breaking an ankle, falling, twisting an ankle, something like that. And something that I recently got was a GPS satellite communications device, which, of course, puts my mom at ease.
Ha ha ha. Oh, always good
Yeah.
to keep mom happy.
Oh, exactly. She would always dread me going out there, but now she has a means of contacting me, and I can contact her whether I'm in cell range or not, and I can also call for help with the push of his button if I was to fall or break my ankle or something like that, and I'm not able to get out of the bush by myself. That is a big thing right there.
Yeah, it's a huge deal, and it summons a thought to me, which is a pretty mainstream thing now, which is the TV show Alone, which I have to imagine that you had a chance to see. But let me
Oh yeah,
pause there. Is
yeah.
is is that something that you'd be into participating in someday? I know it's in the Canadian Arctic, so it's in some ways in your backyard, but in other ways that's a long way north from where you are.
Yes. Yes, I would love to be in something like that. I actually had an interview for something like that. What's it? I think it was a couple years ago. And it was something similar to Alone, but I don't know what happened with them because I did not see it air when it was. I can't remember what it was going to be called, but yes, I definitely would be interested in something like that. You know, um, it'd be a great experience to do that.
Oh
You know,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Lots of dangers out there, and I know one of the things that they do is, hey, they've got that satellite phone like you referenced. So
yeah,
bears are big. Being able to have communication just in case something happens is huge.
exactly.
Is
And
there anything? Weather,
weather
yeah. You
too.
had any
You gotta
experiences
be
with weather?
prepared. Like I pack stuff, emergency blanket, first aid kit, all that kind of stuff, and I plan a pack that if I had to, I could survive the night. You got to plan for it just in case some stuff does happen. And if you have to stay the night, it's best to be prepared than not. You know, and always let people know. A couple friends and family where you're going. So if something does happen, you know, they can send for help, or they know where you're, the kind of area where you are, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're obviously a very experienced hiker going after some amazing adventures. Again, if you want to follow along with Corey's adventure, mountain man underscore Miller on Instagram. So please give Corey a check out and probably a follow too, because I think it's well worth it. Well, yeah, Corey, we appreciate you sharing quite a bit here about your stories and your experiences. But before I let you go, couple final questions for you. Number one is, when you're out there backpacking, what's your number one biggest pet peeve, whether you're on the trail or you're bushwhacking?
Oh, uh, I do have a big one, and I'm pretty sure everyone else can vote for this, is garbage. You know, you're walking a beautiful trail, you're out in the beautiful nature, and then you see garbage on the side of the trail. You know, it's just so easy to put that garbage, grab that garbage, put it in your pocket. But yeah, I would say garbage. And another thing is music. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know people like to go on the trails and like to listen to music and stuff, but there's also some people that like to go out there to get peace and quiet.
Right.
And when I'm walking a trail and I hear blasting rap, not that I have a thing about against rap, but just in this example, that's one of my pet peeves too.
Yeah, no, I can totally appreciate that. We want a pristine environment, and that means the wildlife that are out there. That means just not having it full of debris, and that means not having, you know, um, audio contamination, regardless of what what the type of music is. Totally
Yeah.
can appreciate that. On the flip side of maybe sort of annoyances, looking to something that's maybe a little bit bigger picture. What is the greatest piece of advice that you've ever received, Corey?
Greatest piece of advice I ever received was probably, if you're not comfortable going forward and you're having doubts, turn around, don't take the chance. When I've been up in the mountains and I got into some sketchy terrain and going on a ridge, and it was really windy, and I was just starting to have doubts about myself. And should I turn around? But I'm so close. I'm so close. I could be there in 20 minutes. It's not worth it. It's not worth your life. You can always come back and hike that again. But that was the best piece of advice I've ever had, is if you're not comfortable and you're having doubts about yourself, don't push it.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
okay
great.
to turn around.
Such good advice. And frankly, I think that applies to so many things in life outside of hiking as well. It's
Yeah.
like, trust your gut, because there's a lot of wisdom that's baked in there. And sometimes you can't necessarily always articulate it. And you can rationalize why you shouldn't follow it. Oh, it's only 20 minutes away, or oh, I've heard good, other people said good things about this person. Or I really think if I could take it on one more thing. But if your gut's telling you it's not a good idea, it's a good idea to just pull up and hold off from doing that.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, listen, Corey, we're super excited to have you part of the MuskOx herd. Can't wait to see your next adventure. Again, mountain man underscore Miller on Instagram. And yeah, again, we appreciate you being part of the MuskOx herd. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.
I don't know about you, but I sure loved getting the opportunity to hear Corey describe what that moment is like to him, when he's invested the time, energy, and effort to figure out where he wants to go, the route to get there, invested all that time, energy, and effort to bushwhack up the mountain, and he's sitting there at the summit and has a clear view of glaciers and mountains and lakes, and just what that means to him and what that does for his soul, not just in that moment, but for the weeks, months, and truly lifetime to come. I just love that moment. I hope if you're listening, you'll find that next adventure to be able to have that moment to take your breath away. Here at MuskOx, we certainly want to help you in that journey. goMuskOx.com for outdoor men's apparel that'll help you to get ready for your next adventure, whether that's big or small. I want to give a big shout out to Corey for joining us again today. It's mountainman_Miller on Instagram. Please give him a follow. He's an important member of the MuskOx herd, just like you are. We appreciate you listening. Until next time, I'm your host of The Herd Has Spoken, Bradley Moose.